Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Flamingo Sundays podcast. I'm joined today by a huge inspiration of mine, and he was a man of mystery for me for many, many years. Google his name, and I couldn't really find so many interviews, but I'm very, very fortunate to have Jeff McCloy on the podcast. So, mate, welcome.
Thank you.
And you're well dressed as well, I might add.
Well, you got to get a bit of style when you get a few years. I only got not much else going for me. So.
Mate, even in my research for the podcast, I was listening to some interviews you did, and fashion actually come up with your mother, who was, you thought, maybe not the most fashionable person, or the most fashionable person.
Well, she recently deceased, the old girl, but man, she was dead dreadful taste in colours. I mean, just anyway, she was a wonderful mother.
So, mate, let's take Jeff McCloy back to a young kid. You grew up in Belmont. And your dad was actually a builder as well.
Yeah, Dad was a builder. He went through some difficulties, and he went bankrupt. But he one of the only three people, as I recall, in New South Wales that got out of it and paid everyone back.
Which is very unlike builders in this day and age.
I don't do that these days.
And reflecting back on that now, do you think growing up with with a family that had a building background is what inspired you to get into the game?
Yeah, I think I had a natural talent for that. I was not a very theoretical. Whilst being a civil engineer, I certainly wasn't going to live and work in a design office the rest of my life. I liked the practical aspects of building and building quickly. I think it was just a natural fit for me.
And was it something that you did? I mean, like growing up, I know my dad's in civil construction, and I wasn't very good at school, so I got the boot, and that was the only thing I had to do was go and work with him on the weekends and work with him in school holidays. Were you the same with your old man?
We worked every school holiday, most weekends, from, 10 years of age or something. I recall as a young fellow, must have been only about 12, the labourers could wheel a full wheelbarrow full of bricks. And I was filthy on myself, because I can wheel half a wheelbarrow full of bricks. So that's how it was in those times. But we worked hard, particularly my elder brother and I, nearly all the school holidays.
And did you complete school? You went all the way through, got the university degree, and.
Well, eventually I had a few mishaps, but I got there. Mr. 50%, they call me.
Just enough to pass.
So if you got a pass, you should aim at getting 60. If you get a bad paper, you'll get 50. If you get a good paper, you get 70. I got all bad papers. I got 50 all the time.
Was it enough to pass back then, or did you have to do it again?
I failed everything in first year, but I was playing first grade for Lakes United at the time in rugby league, and I had a contract with them, and I had a few distractions, but I put my head down after that.
Snooker and football were the biggest distractions, weren't they?
They were a bit, yeah.
Reflecting back on that now, would you say that's probably some of the funnest years? That's what most people say, is growing up, the years where they played their sport and had their team around them was some of the best?
Yeah, I played rugby union then for a few years while I was at uni. Whether it helped my grades or not, I don't know, but that camaraderie was different. And after I finished uni, I went back. I had got another contract with rugby league, but it just wasn't the same. I mean, the comradeship that you had with the rugby guys from uni was very, very different from the rugby league world as it was in those days.
In a bad way, would you say, or?
I think you just don't realise it, but you outgrow it. When if you're 19 playing first grade, you think this is all fantastic, but a few years later, you mature. You people that you go to uni with, etc., make you grow as a person. So I found it difficult.
And were you a big partier growing up? Mm-hmm. Were you a big partier? Did you enjoy it?
Nah, not really. I avoided that. I rarely, in fact, went to parties when I was at uni. Why, I don't know, but I just...
Wasn't a thing?
Was uncomfortable, yeah.
What were the clubs back in the day? Was Fanny's around then?
Yeah, that was... I probably went there half a dozen times, but that's all.
There you go. Fuck, I need to pick my game up, you see? Need to avoid it. So you obviously you come through school, you did the sport like most young guys do, and got to uni. Stepping out of university, you didn't go straight into the family business. You went and got a job in a
Yeah,
in a
I
firm.
thought that would be a mistake. You come there and your father has this certain role, and you're seen by other employees and staff as the kid on the block. So I wanted to get some more experience elsewhere. 6 months with Public Works, and I'd had enough of that. About 6 months with Henderson, a builder who I was an estimator, but they ran short of work and they wanted me to do design with wheat silos, and I wasn't going to do that. And fortunately got a job with Lend-Lease on the MLC Centre firm, and I was there for a few years till the tower got to the first major plant room. And it was a great experience. But that experience then, when I came back, allowed me to do the changes that were necessary. In those days, you couldn't buy programs off the shelf. I hired university guys to actually write the programs they wanted to get for the cash flows and for the reports per project. And Dad gave me the freedom to do that. But he soon saw the results of it, and that I was getting the results in the months where getting the IWA by the accountant, and it was 3 months after I'd had the results. So each project was broken down into their budgets, and you had to report internally to those budgets, and we were one of the first companies to actually do it, but we designed and wrote our own programs.
And was that something that you learnt from working inside
Yeah.
of larger enterprises when you left uni?
Very much so. That MLC Centre, that curved columns, there were 3 computer programs for that to be able to build that, because they changed shape on every floor. So the steel shutters then had to be programmed to move, because they went from a curb to the top of that building. If you look at those columns, they're flat. And that was quite an eye-opener for me to see that and the use of technology as it was then.
So reflecting back now, something that you thought maybe wasn't going to be the greatest idea probably turned out to be a blessing in disguise of working outside of the family business.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
I recommend that to all families, not to start straight away in the business. Your youth and your school holidays and such, but getting that external experience, that external thinking with great private enterprise companies is a fine way to learn.
And with the 2 gigs that you had before you joined the MLC, one was obviously in public and one was with another company. When did you know that they weren't right? Because it doesn't seem like you stayed there for very long and you said, well, this isn't right for me, I'm out.
Yeah, just like that. I'm out of here.
There wasn't something you dwelled on too much. You thought, no, it worked out, this isn't right for me, I'm out.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I think that's a issue with probably a lot of younger people, right? Is they probably hang around for too long, they deliberate and they worry about whether I'm going to get another job or
yeah, possibly, but you've got to be able to back yourself or understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, or you have to understand, what you'd really like to do and pursue it. Don't sit in a hole for another 3 years scratching your head and wondering if what you should be doing. Get out and do the bloody thing.
And I have this conversation all the time with people. Like when you come out of uni into your first gig, were you worried about the dollars you were getting paid, or was it just about the experience in your mind?
Well, I don't know. I must have been a reasonable negotiator. From memory, first year university graduate was on about $5,500 a year. Within 2 years, I was earning over twice that. 3 years, I was earning over twice that. So, my first wife got pregnant. I had a home loan based on 2 of our wages.
What was your first property? How much that cost?
$60,000.
On a 5,000 income, wow. That's crazy. 12 times.
Wow. If you got to do it, you got to do it, eh?
And with the income, you said you obviously increased threefold in the first couple of years. So would you say that you went to a company, you showed the value of yourself to that company, and they increased your income, or you negotiated your income, or? You just had a charm about you where you walked in the door and they threw money at you?
No, I was, for quite some time, I was on the job 7 days a week. I mean, it wasn't like there wasn't any effort.
Yeah.
Cranes on Sundays were maintained. And quite often I'd be there, even if it's only 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday, regularly.
Yeah. So you're fully committed to
Yeah.
the job and
Yeah.
your career. And then after you finished up with the MLC, is that when you stepped back into the family business?
Yeah, Dad and Mum came down a few times on the hoarding and tried to get me to come back. I said, "Oh, Dad, no, I've got a great career here." No, anyway, he gave up, but he let Mum loose on me, so she took me anyway. So I said, "Right, I'll give it a year." Anyway, 50 years later, I'm still in the business.
And how different was the business back then to what you in essence have grown it into?
Oh, Dad was pretty smart in that he only did commercial buildings. He wouldn't work and build houses for people. I remember him saying to me, not only you get 2 people to work for, then they got their weekend experts, and then they got their brothers and their cousins, and instead of working for one person, you're working for bloody 20. And if you've got to do that to get some turnover, you've got to get 20 houses being going at once. That means you're working for 400 people, and that's brain damage. So commercial buildings were the go, and we did a lot of them.
And as you stepped into the business, how long did it take for you to start to progress to a point where you started to see it as your own business as opposed to working inside of a family business?
Well, Dad had a manager that had, in fact, 10% of the business, and he allegedly said he was going to retire. And I was the only one to buy out his shares, and in doing so, I wanted a non-competition clause in that payout. I remember him going to Dad and saying, "Oh, I wouldn't do anything to hurt this business. I've worked here all my life, blah, 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 blah." And I'm insulted. Dad asked me to remove it, and I removed it. He went out and started his own building company a month later, and that's the story, but I had no regrets. I never said one word to my father about that. I just got on with doing what we were doing.
Yeah. And just on that, I think... I'm new to business and this is all learnings that I'm going through myself, but the correlation between having strong relationships and, friendships and then having a business, which you obviously need to protect as well, how important do you feel it is to not let those lines cross and get blurred like it sounds like it potentially did in that scenario?
I think it's extremely important wherever you can to keep personal away from business. I did used to watch my mum and dad argue all the time over this stuff called money, and I didn't want that. And as most families go through, they have an issue at times with the allocation of their internal resources, and I swore to myself that I wouldn't let that happen. I'd have to make a bit more.
and I also, when I was doing my research, read that was one of the big drivers for you and, making sure that you're financially successful is growing up, going through a bankruptcy. I'm sure that maybe not at the time, but probably had a lasting impression.
Well, it does. It teaches you some really, really good lessons too. I remember Dad starting back to work and he put his tools in a sugar bag and went out and caught the bus down to Belmont. The cost of the bus was a penny. So it was a penny for us to... Mum was a little snobbish and didn't want us to go to Belmont North School. She thought the Belmont School was better, so that's about 5 k's away, and she didn't have a penny to put us on the bus because that's all it was, a penny. So we just ran to school, ran home again. Thought nothing of it.
Fit kids.
Yeah. Well, we got some second-hand bikes after that, and another harsh lesson was a full-size bike, and I was only short, but I used to ride it with my legs through the bar, pedal down the street through the bar and back and forth.
Make use of what you have, right?
Yeah.
And you said that you never went without food on the table, even though times were tough at certain points. It doesn't seem like it. Right. With the things that mattered, it was.
Yeah, there was always fresh fruit for. I had 3 brothers, and growing up, we could certainly eat.
Yeah. With the business as you were transitioning through, I'm assuming from what you've grown it into, your vision for the company and your aspirations and growth were potentially slightly different to your father's at the time. When did you really start to go, well, Dad, let's
I remember we did our own quoting then, so we'd be on the job early, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, still quoting for other jobs. And after a few years went on, I thought, gee, I can't keep this up forever, I'll burn out. I started to look at, well, how do we invest in other things? And very early we built the Gillstown Shopping Centre, where we had a pub, we had an income from the shopping centre to diversify your income, because I studied other builders and over the years and looked at their track record, and even the big ones, a lot of them end up going broke because
like we're seeing now.
The risk is so high and the margins are so low. So I was scratching my head for alternatives, and I found a little subdivision at Belmont North for 14 lots of land, and I borrowed some money off Dad and put my money with it and turned those 14 blocks over, and I made $500,000 in 6 months.
Was it just from developing, or did you build on those as well?
No, just did the subdivision.
Yeah.
As I called it in those days. We talk about them philosophically now as communities, because we like creating communities, and it's a completely different culture that you can grow in your company when you speak of things like that. But I made $500,000 in 6 months, and I thought, how long has this been going on? Working all year from bloody dawn to day, and the building company might have made $200,000 blasted dollars. So we then progressed onwards. We then won the contract for the the John Hunter Hospital.
This is very interesting. Yeah.
So I was very occupied for a while and building that blasted thing, man. That could have put us under, but it didn't. And it was enormously successful.
And there was a project that came after the John Hunter that...
Yeah, I was having a good day till you reminded me about that. Yeah. I thought after the John Hunter, we could build anything, so I started an office in Sydney. Didn't import any of the culture of the people that I had here, which is a big mistake. They got 4 jobs in about 4 months. And wow, I get myself into trouble. We were losing money hand over fist. I was selling assets up here to pay everybody out, pay the bills out. I ended up with those 4 projects in arbitration or court. We eventually got most of the money back, but it was a painful experience. I'd drive down there on a Monday with a suitcase and book into the hotel, go from floor to floor to floor on the different projects to get the jobs going and finished, then work like a demon at night to look at the variations, the changes, the charges, the cash flows. But I never wanted to do that again. And I came back, and within 12 months after cleaning that mess up, and it was a mess, I stopped building.
What was the motivation after the John Hunter? Like, it was obviously an ultra successful project. What was the motivation then to scale and go to Sydney? Was it?
I was a bit mad.
Or was it because you had the aspirations to have a statewide or nationwide building company, or it just was a natural progression?
I thought it was a natural progression. I didn't think it through enough, and I didn't bring the culture of the people we had up here, down there. They were all new staff. Big mistake.
And were they different projects to what you were doing in the Newcastle region?
Oh yeah, there were a movie, a theatre. That was a nightmare. Sussex Street, a hotel tower.
In the city?
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't remember that stuff, right? It was a bad story, but I got out of it. Well, wow, that was a hard lesson, but you got to have some scars. You just can't go through a business career without having scars. You just can't do it.
And reflecting back on it now as a learning, it sounds like one of the big ones was making sure that when you do scale and grow, that the culture of the company and what you've built as your core, moves with the business.
Exceptionally important. Retention of great staff, looking after great staff, is exceptionally important, and growing that culture. So that I think in one of those things you would have seen, it's the wanting to be the best in your field that you can, not accepting second best.
Did you, on that, did you ever, look, because it doesn't matter what level you're at. I interviewed so many people, and there's always someone that is bigger and, perceives better. Did you ever struggle with that, looking at whoever the next best builder is or the next best developer is and wanting to be at that scale?
You try and learn from them, but no, just being bigger and chasing turnover is a mistake. Having the right people and creating the right culture is a very, very important thing. It's like the flatter the structure you can get, these hierarchical structures that are like in government. It's just a very inefficient way to go. And the same with public companies. Public companies, they're afraid, and they get the shareholders these days on the boards that, they're woke. And it results, we benchmark our own company against all the other property development companies. So turnover per employee, EBIT data, staff, number of staff per your turnover. And so you don't kid yourself in terms of how your business is going. You must measure, and we measure.
And is that how you make adjustments to the business in today's environment?
No.
I heard you've got a pretty heavy board of directors too. It's yourself and the mirror of a morning, and you have your board meeting and.
Well, yeah. I tell that story. I have a board meeting in the morning when I have a shave. I give myself an uppercut now and then too. Don't worry.
And do you think that is beneficial to the company's success? Is not necessarily having too many chefs in the kitchen?
Oh yeah. No doubt. You listen very intently to your senior staff. You look at the homework very intently. I'm unusual that I don't really look at the balance sheet hardly at all, but our whole culture is about cash flow. What's being spent on what project, what's coming in, what's their rate of sale, what's this. Everything in our reporting mechanism is revolves around cash flow. Where is the money? We do 5-year in projections of cash flow in advance. 5 years.
And that's based on projects that are in the pipeline. And
that's based on the pipeline and the approval process.
Right.
And a certain rate of sales, yes.
And would you say you've got that down to a pretty fine-tooth comb now of how accurate it can become?
When the interest rate goes up like it is at the moment, there are variables, but you don't ever leave yourself without buffer room. You've got to have space for what something's going to go wrong, because it does. It's business.
And when you transitioned from being a builder to getting out of the building game and just focusing on development, one of the main reasons for that, I'm assuming, was cash flow and having the good experiences in the developing space and not so great experiences sometimes in the building space. Yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
What did the transition look like from pick up, I'm assuming a building you would have had a lot of staff and a very different business?
We were doing communities, one or two at a time, whilst we started building, and I fundamentally gave the business to my senior staff. They paid me a few bucks for some trucks or some cars or something, but they then had their office, and the business still traded as D.F. McCloy for quite some time, and it's still trading now as under Graph. Some of its shareholders have retired, etc., but that company's still actively building today. But I just had enough, and it was a fairly easy decision to make. And then we started off by not only having one community we're doing, we had 2, 3, 4, and I think we may have, 18 in various stages as we sit here today.
Wow. And when you say communities, they're like land subdivisions where you turn them into incredible communities.
Yeah.
And was that your whole, I guess, model when you transitioned, was to not just find a block of land and turn it into 10 or 20 or 30 houses, but to completely transform an area?
Yes, it was. I try to get into the minds of their customers, and in doing so I said to myself, well, where would I like to live? Many years ago in Adelaide, I looked at a subdivision, and there was a almost identical topography. One had this fantastic stone entryway to it, and the other one was just plain, with a sign up, street sign up. The one with this fantastic stone feature was selling for $20,000 a block more than the one without it. And it signified to me that people want to have a sense of coming home. They want to have a sense of quality. Hence, we transferred that not only to our entry statements. Now, have you seen our vast amount of public art we put through all our communities? The detail and time we put in the park, because every time I drive in there, there's either a grandfather with the kids or mum and dad or the netball court or something. So it creates a better space, and by simply saying, well, where would I prefer to live and what feels nicer, and we quite often put different entry statements in the same community that we build. And it's a sense of quality and a sense of coming home to something of high standard.
And it gives people that sense of this is home, as opposed to just a block of land as in a paddock somewhere.
Exactly.
The artwork's incredible. Do you find the different artists or the different people you're going to commission to do the statement pieces?
We do it in a number of ways. Sometimes we commission it. Sometimes one of the young fellas will go down to one of the sculpture exhibitions and negotiate it with the artist. Here's a check, we'll put it on the truck, how much, see you later.
Yeah.
But we try and theme it. Out there at Terrell, for example, near the lake, we'll have pelicans and ducks and fish and such stuff. Up at Madawi, we'll have that big waratah metal flower that you saw. The pottery, which is on an old pottery site, we've made these out of bricks, massive big pots. So we try and theme with the art the communities that we're working in. To tie into the overall environment and feel. Correct.
Yeah. And that plays into the overall McCloy Group brand, right? Like it's
yeah. I didn't really understand a brand till about 5 years ago when young Lani pointed out our brand was well recognised, and I now understand. And when people, and the average person drives into one of our communities, we don't have massive signs everywhere, but people tend to know straight away that that's ours.
When you were coming through, it's probably called reputation, right? Make sure you keep your reputation strong, and they've just changed the word into brand now.
Well, yeah, no one's too old enough to learn.
Exactly. What would you say some of the biggest learnings have been since now? How many blocks have you delivered? Thousands and thousands of homes, and and communities. Like reflecting back on that, I'm sure what you do now is very different from the first subdivision you did back in Belmont.
Yeah, you know, you've got to keep watching, you've got to keep learning, you've got to keep reading, you've got to keep understanding it. So business is a dynamic thing. Unless you keep changing, most people don't like change, but you have to have change, and you have to embrace change. Changing yourself, changing your thinking, being progressive about that. It's a very healthy thing to do.
And one of the things you said that really stuck with me was being curious as well, around not being so fixed-minded on, well, this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way it must be done.
No. You that's where you... I'm reading a book now about horizontal management, not this hierarchical management. And you've got highly intelligent people. If you're going to pour a column, you can have a crane and kibble, you can pump it, you can put teaspoons in a bucket. And, as long as you've done the maths on how to do it, doing it efficiently and have done your homework, go and do it. If you micromanage people, what fun of that is for them to go to work? They've got brains, go and use them.
And you're paying them to use them as well.
Yeah.
What about the different markets that you've been through? Like over the 50 odd years you've been in some facet of the real estate business. I'm sure you've seen many different markets. You've probably experienced the GFC, COVID, and whatever was before that, you know, the 2000 .com bubble. Is there any, I guess, common threads that come through, you know, each one of those markets? And
well, the last couple of years, for example, has been a boom. Even in the boom, where we sold land faster than we had to adjust. To give you an example, there were lead time on 300 millimetre concrete pipes of something like 12 or 14 weeks. Now, if you dig a hole in the ground and you can't put a pipe in it for 14 weeks, your whole project stops for 14 weeks. What we did is went out and bought hundreds of metres of pipes and stored them. So when we dug the hole in the ground, we had a pipe to go in it. Now that takes a lot of cash, but it also was a lot of planning. We go out and we buy substations. We know we're going to need a substation in 6 months' time. You don't get there and then work out you're going to order a substation. You buy them and you store them. So even in a boom, you have to be on top of the game. Because if you didn't do that, if we didn't do that and others didn't, because they have to rely on the banks, for example, to get pre-sales before they can start. So getting pre-sales, then the bank will give you, then you start the project, and by the time the project's finished, you've missed the boom, you've sold it for, of course the prices have gone up, and you've probably sold it and not made a profit. We don't wait for the banks to tell us when we can start and when we can't, because we don't use them.
And that's because you've built up, you know...
We build up the capital reserves not to be able to have to go to the bank.
So if you were starting off again now as 25-year-old Jeff McCloy, maybe without the resources that you've got at your disposal now, how would you think about, you know, growing to a level or surpass where you are right now? If you were starting again now, how would you go about starting?
Well, I'd try and run multiple projects as early as I possibly could. In other words, instead of buying one as we did in like 1,600 lots and we just concentrated on that, halfway through that I've had enough capital, I'd go out and buy 2 more of those projects. The crazy thing about our country in this business is that here we have 27 million people in 3 million square miles, and we have the dearest land just about in the world. It makes no sense. But the government departments, with all their environmental issues, we have the toughest environmental laws in the world. They've cut off the supply. So they're not rezoning the land. So we're not getting any competition. So we have the holdings, which we have without debt. You are so far in front in dealing with the competition, and you're fundamentally, the prices were going up so fast. we changed tack again and didn't put a price on it. We went out in blocks of 6 or 8 units and sent it, pre-selected them, went to auction. They auctioned online. And they were going, I don't know, I think at Taralba, my feasibility said we'd sell the blocks at 180,000. I think we're selling them now for 550,000. Because they've cut off the supply.
How good's that feasibility looking? Usually feasibilities go the other way.
But that's the beauty of this business.
Yeah, okay.
So you do the sums on what you think the sale price will be, and then you've got to carefully look at your costs. But over a period of time, the normal cycles are around 7 years, you're going to have a big cost increase because again they've cut off the supply. Maitland, for example, there's a lot of residential supply. It's where we make our least margin because we've got competition. Mm. Other places where we're in isolation, it's not our fault. It's a bloody stupid government.
Yeah.
And all the departments they've got down there that are hindering supply. There's, not Madawi, Kings Hill. Kings Hill was nominated 17 years ago for residential. It was going to be the supply of residential land for Port Stephens. 17 years later, not one block's been developed. Not only that, the Chinese owners that own the majority of it are now in court over koalas. So that whole area of, how many lots? 4,000 lots? None of them come to market today. And they haven't rezoned any other land in the main in Port Stephens. So, and it's all government driven.
So it's all scarcity, right? The more scarce the supply is, the stronger the prices are.
And it's madness.
So if you were starting again now, from what I heard, it sounds like you'd ideally be continuing to reinvest the capital that you're making off Project 1, 2 and 3 into scaling.
Yes.
As fast as you can, but also, doing the planning to make sure that you're doing it efficiently.
Yep. Yeah, you always got to have a plan. You've always got to be watching cash flows. We have we adjustment every month. It gets looked at and looked at and looked at.
What do you think some of the biggest issues are that novice developers or investors make when it comes to the overall cash flow? Because you see, over the last 12 months, how many builders, and maybe not developers, but builders have gone, belly up.
Well, it's very difficult for any. Competition sucks. I don't want any more competition, all right? So it's just a growth. It's just a growth. You've got to be able to bite it off, but you still got to be able to chew it. Yeah.
And something that you've done, which I actually wasn't conscious of, but I learned it from listening to one of the podcasts, was you just simply focus on what you know and what you're an expert at, which is building communities and the retirement villages, and you've sort of not ventured too much into high density resi or.
Look, I bought shares in public companies twice. I lost a lot of dough doing that on tips. One was in America. I got some money back and I bought a ski lodge, and then I bought another one and then another one. So I put it back into what I understand and know. I don't get too distracted from the main game. I'm not one into Bitcoin and all this other stuff. But focusing on what we do. For example, you then said, I don't build high-rise, and I've deliberately stayed away from them. Because in that market, you've only got a window of a year, roughly. So if you miss the cycle, and you've got this massive tower of half-empty units, or you've got enough for pre-sales and you can't finish it off, you're likely to get in destroyer. Mm. So I've avoided it, because what we do is over a long period of time, and you buy it off little chunks like that, which you can easily digest. But if you've got to buy it off a tower and you get your timing wrong, Wouldn't like to be halfway through a town in this town on today, I can tell you.
And when you say you can take off little chunks, so with the communities that you build, naturally you release them in stages, right? So
Correct.
If it's not the right point in time to release a stage, you just hang on to the land, especially when you've got a strong balance sheet.
Yep.
Mate, something that I love and I know that you've got a big passion for is boating, yachting. Well, you built a pretty incredible boat.
Oh yeah, that was safari.
That was the only thing I bloody read when I looked your name up online.
Hey?
That was the only thing I could find was the boat story.
Yeah, we built it. Four Jacks did the hull, and gee, that was an experience. I thought I could build it for 12 million. I think it might have went to 20.
How big was it? How many? 160 foot or so?
40 metres.
Yeah, right.
But it won in its class the best super yacht in the world.
It was a catamaran, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful piece of work.
And the reason I brought that up is because naturally, as you start to make more money, life has more options for you and more opportunity. Do you think it's important as you start to become more successful financially that you scratch the itch with things like that, like cars and holidays and boats, or do you think again it can be a self-fulfilling nightmare sometimes?
Well, I love the sea, and I love fishing, and I love snorkeling. My days of spearfishing are probably just about over, but I've done an enormous amount of that, and I love the ocean. There's no traffic lights, there's no freaking horns blasting, blowing. You see the wildlife, the birds, the sickle of a fin of a fish going past, the catching and the cooking of the same stuff. To me, it's peace. It's just such a beautiful place. We've just come back from the Kimberleys. Did Rachel send you some of that video of the Kimberleys?
No, I never seen it.
Oh my God, it's just outstanding. That was probably the longest break I've ever had away from the business, was 3 months, but we Skyped and had our meetings and that sort of stuff, and I'd still see some numbers, but there's nothing like coming back and feeling and touching and seeing and your projects. That's a must.
Right. So it sounds like when you've potentially spent a bit of money on discretionary items, it's usually been because you've got a passion for that thing as opposed to just going, well, I got plenty of dough now and people with plenty of dough own boats.
Oh no, it's been my father had boats, all my brothers have a boat.
Yeah.
I might have a few more than one, but anyway, I've got a new one coming in January actually, so it'll be a bit of fun.
They're going to be up
but
in...
yeah, so long as you can pay for it. If people go along and they see a nice car and all of a sudden they're making lease payments to drive around a flash car, I've never done that. Unless I can write a cheque, I don't buy it. Unless I can afford to maintain it, I don't buy it. So driving a nice car, well, it feels nice and it's safer, but if that's your goal, just to make money in life and you haven't got a passion for your business, you're very unlikely to succeed.
And would you say for you that's been a big thing, like when you've gone through the tough times, because like you said, it hasn't always been rosy and skittles. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't have the grunt to get through it when you haven't got a passion for the business.
You have to have the passion. You haven't got a passion, don't do it.
Did you ever dabble in things where you didn't have a passion and thought, oh, well, this isn't going to work, I'm back out of this?
Yeah, the 2 times I bought some shares.
Mate, I respect your time and I know you're a busy man. Just before we wrap up, for a young person listening now, they're an aspiring investor, developer, builder. What would be one of your biggest pieces of advice?
The biggest piece of advice, I think, is to outsource as much as you can. In other words, I think humans have the capacity only to be able to manage a certain number of people. In the building days, if companies had more than 100 staff, they used to start to worry. our office down there is only 21 people, but we turned over about $200 million last year with 21 people.
So when you $8.5 million per person.
So when you outsource, so we don't have internal engineers. We have one internal planner, but we use other planning companies. We don't have internal surveyors. We outsource all those so they can manage their own business. We call tenders, we get prices, we let an order and outsource. When you try to manage so many people, it is very difficult to do in an efficient way. So my message would be, whatever you can outsource, you outsource, and then manage.
So have a really small core high performance team and
absolutely
outsource whatever else you can.
Whatever else you can.
Is that in your personal life as well? Don't try and do, we call it highest and best use. If your time's worth X amount of dollars, try not to do things.
Yes. Sometimes a simple thing, we've spoken about a big boat, but 4 of my mates bought a share of Diner Island. We've only got bourais and bungalows there. We've got cattle on the property now. I've got a little 20-foot boat there, which we go barra fishing in. It's simple. We have electric quads there now where we go around, shoot the pigs, because they really do make a mess of the wetlands and stuff we've got there. So it's sport and it's a bit of entertainment. So, but that is a simple life. We cook our own food. We make our own stuff. I can have a chef there if I want it, but we don't. I could have a deckhand there if we want it, but I don't. So it's still doing things yourself, I find important. And just, in the yacht, you see these super yacht shows a bit on TV and you think, they're upset when they get dressed up for dinner if the knife isn't an inch off the plate, and I mean, for goodn's sake. And it's almost like some people grow up and demand that's their expectations of themselves. Well, that's what a hogwash, you ask me.
Enjoy the simple things.
Enjoy the simple things.
Gold. Mate, thank you very much for taking the time and coming on.
Okay.
I got a lot out of it, and that's all that matters. Thank you. Mate, that was gold.